Welcome to the Second Bite Podcast, where we talk with top entrepreneurs and CEOs about creating valuable companies through creative transactions. Now, let's get started with the show.
Welcome back to the Second Bite Podcast. This is going to be a really interesting, different version of the Second Bite Podcast. Nat Berman is with me, who maybe a lot of our listeners know from your online presence, which is a pretty substantial one, Nat. And we're going to get into all of what it is that you do. But I want to start by saying thanks for making time and being with us today.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So there's a lot of, I think, similarities, Nat, in what you and I do. You know, we, as this is titled the Second Bite Podcast, we help clients create an opportunity with their business where they get a chunk of cash up front and then they get a big hunk of equity that they can turn into something interesting. But it also gives them a bigger platform to do something more impactful with their life. And I think that you do the same thing in a much different way. But so if we can start with, you know, the name of the business, what you do and who you do it for. But then if we can, let's go back to the beginning, because I think it's the beginning part and how you got to now that's such an interesting part of the story.
Sure. So in terms of what I do right now, essentially I run a one-to-one coaching practice, and I usually work with folks at the executive level, a lot of CEOs, and essentially what I sell, for lack of a better word, is the ability to create clarity for someone within their career, and their lives within a relatively short period of time. I usually say 90 days or so. And really what I specialize in is working with folks who are at various inflection points in their lives. So they could be wanting to grow a business. They could be at a point where they're kind of 10 to 15 years in and wondering, what the hell do I do now? What was all this for? You know, some of it is philosophical, some of it is tactical. So essentially that's kind of what I do. And how that all came to be was really a 17-year sort of journey of my own, which was going out on my own and starting my own business with, really 6 months or so savings. This was back in 2008. I was a recruiter by trade, ran searches for mostly investment banks. Goldman Sachs was our biggest client. Never really liked being a recruiter. It just wasn't my thing. And one day a buddy of mine just sent me this link to a Google blogging platform called Blogspot, which actually still exists today, for everyone listening who's hopefully old enough to remember. So oddly enough, I had always liked writing. I mean, that was just something I liked doing since I was younger. Never really thought about having a career doing it, but started a website and really got immersed in it and learned how to monetize and make money off of it. And essentially, sort of rinse and repeated and wound up building a pretty substantial portfolio of websites, which kind of carried me through, led me to financial independence at a reasonably young age. I think I was about 36 when that all occurred, and just continued on doing it. Still have the portfolio to this day, but luckily it's very passive at this point. I literally spend about 45 minutes per day on it early in the mornings, and I'm getting to the point where I'm hopefully going to be spending 0 minutes a day, where I'm essentially passing it off to another company to run all the properties. So that's where I'm at now. Happy to talk about anything else, LinkedIn.
So you've reached financial independence. How do you define that?
It's a great question. When I deem myself financially free, I essentially look at it as being able to do really the things I want, when I want to do them, with whom I want to do them, and having the means to do so. And to me, that means living a life that's obviously within or below your means. So I don't have a mansion. I don't have a mortgage that's, $10K plus a month. But I do have a very, very good life. Love my house, love my family. And so I kind of built a lifestyle around what I felt I was comfortable with the things that I did want to achieve, that I wanted to have. Obviously, I wanted to be able to spend time with my family, wanted to be able to go on nice vacations, have a house that I could pay for, And luckily I was able to do all that. And now I kind of look at everything else as sort of icing on the cake. And whatever I achieve and maintain from here on out is wonderful. It's a blessing, but it's not vital for me to survive and live and, make sure that everyone that I care about is taken care of.
Two-part question. Financial security is a combination of money and your mindset. True or false? And then or how would you adapt that? The second part would be, what out of 10? So if money and mindset equals 10, what number would you give to money and what number would you give to mindset?
That's a great question. I mean, if I was 18, I would say money is like a 9, right? And I'm now 44, and I would almost give them equal weight. And it's just interesting because you learn that as you go on and on and on. And having been through therapy and coaching myself, there really is a belief system out there that if you create it for yourself, it will manifest. And it just sounds so hokey and weird as I say it. I mean, it's just so strange how, as you mature, the philosophical side of things actually do play an extremely important role. But in terms of, how important is each? Like I said, to answer your question directly, I'd say they were equally important. It's really about knowing who you are, what you're okay with. And a lot of times that's very hard to do at a young age. It's, you're reaching for the heights of financial success and the admiration of your peers. And you're trying to do a lot of things that essentially, in my mind, society and culture are sort of pushing on you, especially, being in America, a very capitalist centric society. So I think I bought into a lot of that, and to an extent even still do, right? I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat that. I definitely want materialistic things that I think a lot of people try to attain as well. But as you get older, one thing I could never shake that I always knew I never really wanted to do was work for someone else and be accountable. And it had very little to do with if they were nice to me or not or anything like that. I mean, I've had some pretty awful bosses in my day and some great ones. That it was just the fact that I wanted to be accountable to myself. And I went after it and never really looked back. But yeah, I mean, finance is a big thing if you make it a big thing. The reality is you can live anywhere in the world. You could live on very, very little money. It's a matter of choice, what you prefer. And look, I live in one of the most expensive places in the universe, Long Island, and it's expensive, but I've got family here and I have no intention of leaving, and I like it. So I have to make that work.
Yeah. And it's more fun oftentimes when you have more resources.
Yep.
When you had mentioned that, you talk to people at certain inflection points in their life, is there one or two that are the most common inflection point that people feel like they need help or perspective getting their head around?
Absolutely. I think the most common one, especially with those in leadership positions and those at a bit more of an executive level, so much of it is about this lingering question that they always have, which is what the hell do I want? They don't know what the hell they want. And that's the biggest question I always get, which is, I've got the car, I've got the family, I've got the vacations, I've got this, that, and the other, but something is still missing. And finding that is oftentimes quite daunting and challenging, especially when things continue to pile up year after year, day after day within the job, within the life that you're leaving, that you're living at home. So I think a lot of times people are really just looking for more time, a little bit more freedom, more options. But honestly, it's really about clarity. It's about understanding, who they are and what they want. And when they can get around that, the other stuff usually tends to follow.
And that requires a certain amount of introspection and self-awareness. Is there something that has caused that? Is there a divorce or a heart attack or a failed business or a firing of a job? Is there a life event that caused that?
Sometimes there are things that are going on in people's lives that are absolutely catalysts for a particular phase in one's life. That does exist. When those exist, it depends on the situation. So if I'm talking with someone and it gets very personal and maybe there's an addiction or something like that, I will hand them off 9 times out of 10 to a therapist, right? Because that's not what I do. But one of the interesting things about my line of work is that more often than not, when someone comes to me with a specific issue, let's say that issue is, I've been working at the same company for 15 years. I want to go off on my own. I want to start a business and I want to be independent, right? Like that's a very standard thing to say. Within 3 to 4 weeks, every time, without fail, it's always, I don't feel enough about myself. I don't think I'm good enough. I don't this, it always, every single time, it's a matter of introspection. It's a matter of self-worth. It's a matter of how they feel about themselves. And
these are successful people, Ned, right? These are guys that if I saw him at dinner or at the club or whatever it is, I would say, man, that dude's got his act together.
100%.
Yeah.
These are people that can fly their own jets. I mean,
so these are guys that can't tell somebody else, or are they unaware that they feel that inside until it comes out?
In those first 3 to 4 weeks, there's usually a lot of ego in there that's sort of masking what a potential real problem is.
And what do they use for words to why they came to you?
A lot of times, the word is clarity. The word is focus. The word is, what am I deciding to do? It's just having, a lot of times these people actually do have a lot of choice. They do have this flexibility, but knowing that they can do so many different things makes it very problematic for them to be able to decide to focus on one or two, when deep down they know that that's the most, effective way to live their lives. I happen to believe that. And so many people make their lives so much more complex than they need to be. And they need someone to sort of help them navigate as to what really matters to them and what doesn't. And once you can sort of free up those things that are really just baggage, and you can let them go, that's when you can truly focus on the stuff that really matters.
What's the most common thing that people complicate their life with?
Honestly, it's focusing on just too many things. I happen to be a staunch believer in every single day you really need anywhere from 1 to 3 things that you have to focus on very, very specifically.
So you're talking about they have too much stuff to focus on, from too much stuff, too much opportunity, too much work, not enough time.
Yeah, I mean, all of the above. So essentially, I have someone that I spoke to who has opportunities left and right, and he can't say no, right? And
so what's the example? Like, where do the opportunities come from? This guy's an entrepreneur, an executive, or
entrepreneur, referral-based business, has opportunities all the time, works with people who are, very wealthy, and they'll come to him with a myriad of different things: business opportunities, the need to be consulted with. And
they all sound exciting.
And they're all, everything's exciting. Exactly. Yeah. But the funny thing is, there are always these common themes that arise with everyone that I talk to. And it's kind of like, well, what do you really want to do? And these things come up, and it's like, well, what's stopping you from doing that? Well, and I don't blame any of them, by the way, because some of them have responsibilities. They've got families, they've got mortgages, they've got a lot of things. So navigating around that isn't easy, and coming up with a specific plan isn't the easiest thing. But once you can sort of get there, that's when the real work kind of starts.
So that's interesting. I have a last question there and I want to move on. How many people, as a percentage, how many folks you work with are men versus women, roughly? And how many are executives with salary jobs versus entrepreneurs?
So right now I'm working with 2 CEOs and 2 business owners. The 2 business owners are, independent entrepreneurs. The CEOs are CEOs. One of them started his company from the ground up. The other started his company as a inheritance. But almost everyone I work with is in some way, shape, or form a founder or a CEO.
Got it. And what's the split between men and women?
Right now, it's actually 50-50.
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
I think the early part of your career, and you've talked about this online, the fact that you were recently offered, I think you said it was $5 million for your portfolio websites. And to have it be that passive and reliable of an income stream that somebody would offer you that. Tell me how you got started. I know you told us the quick, but can you give us a little bit more insight into, and I know we're going all the way back to 2008, but how did you start it? Could you give any examples of what it actually is? What does it do? And
Sure.
how do you, that'd be fascinating.
Yeah, sure. So just a slight correction, I wasn't offered $5 million to sell my portfolio. It was an opportunity to infuse cash into it to grow it. So it would have been working with, a private equity company to essentially continue managing it, but, growing it and scaling it.
If it would have been $5 million for Nat, would that have been a different answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. If someone handed me $5 million for my portfolio today, I would likely take it. So in terms of the business itself, the best way I can describe it and the easiest way I can explain it to people is I always like to just call it digital real estate. It's a very, very straight up way to define it. And I'm not talking about, fake virtual worlds that people buy in like imaginary planets. It's not that. It's literally very, very similar to buying an apartment building, managing it, getting rent. It's just, I happen to look at it as being a lot easier than that. And the returns are generally a little bit more generous.
So the traffic that comes into your sites, you're able to, there's certain people that are interested in the folks that come to your sites and have products and services that they would be interested in. And so you can sell that as advertising or lead gen.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a good way of putting it. I'm in a much more specialized, specific area. So I'm all digital display advertising. So I actually don't do lead gen or affiliate products or anything like that. All you see on my sites are display ads. That's it. So they only make money based on the number of impressions that the website gets. So
Can you share one example?
Sure. I have a site called Money Inc. MONEYINC. Moneyinc.com, which is one of my larger properties. And if a user clicks on an article and they scroll around and they read all the content, there will be a number of ads that sort of pop up in front of their eyes. And every time their eye looks at an ad, that counts as an impression, and I get paid for those impressions. It's very similar to television advertising. It's like if 1,000 people are watching a TV show, they get paid for the real estate. It's very, websites are very similar.
Sure. And so then you drive traffic there because people know you and the name and are interested in your content. And then that content is also searchable and people find the articles and read, and that drives attention as well.
Yeah, the biggest driver is search engine traffic by far. So, sites like Google, that's where I get the majority of my traffic.
And you've learned, for example, it's Money Inc.
Mm-hmm.
On moneyinc.com, what people like to read and see there. And so you write that into that specific vertical. That, and,
there's a whole nother element to it, which is really, keyword research. Seeing what articles do well. So if let's say you have a good niche and you're focused on credit cards or something like that. If those articles are doing well, you continue doing more. You expand on the topics, you expand on, the credit cards that you cover, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just based on a lot of repetition and a lot of articles that have already been written.
And then is it similar to, like, I see stuff, headline grabbing things, the 10 best credit cards in America today. And that would take me to, I'm making this up, creditcards.com. And on creditcards.com, I can read all this stuff. And each time I look at that, it generates revenue for whoever owns the site.
That's exactly how I would put it. Yep.
Gotcha. And then does that make you a publisher?
Sure. Absolutely.
Got it. And so you started with this Money Inc. and now you have multiple sites doing different things as well.
Yeah, Money Inc. was actually a little bit newer compared to the rest, but that was 2016. So
what was the first one you did?
Well, there's a site called Uncoached, Uncoached, which actually began as more of a men's lifestyle site. I would actually equate it to like a Maxim or Barstool Sports of today. My site and that site actually came up at almost the identical times. So initially when I was that was written all by me. And so I would cover really pop culture, sports, entertainment, women, and the whole gamut. And I started getting links from Sports Illustrated, which is sort of what put it on the map. So every day I would market my stuff to a lot of different outlets.
Yeah. So how did you get a link from Sports Illustrated back in the day?
I emailed them every day.
Saying,
so they actually had this, and they still have it to this day. They have this thing called Extra Mustard, which is like this link dump that they produce. I believe it's every day. I haven't been on there in many, many years, but essentially their editor looks for good content that they can dish out to their readers. And they had like an email address that said, email your stories to here. And I would email my stories every day until I got a link back. And I did, and it worked out. And then that led to more and more links, and that led to more traffic from Google, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that site no longer exists. It's more of a placeholder for my company now, but yeah, that's how it all started.
And that did well because in Google's eyes, you became a known site or a credible site or something, an acronym like that. And so now you've grown out multiple sites that you have now?
Yeah, there's right now there's 24 in the portfolio total.
And so is this what you would consider your day job? You write content for those, or do you hire people to write content?
No, my job's coaching now. I literally don't do much work on the websites anymore. Like I said, it's about 40 to 45 minutes each day. So I don't write anything. I have a writing service, which is basically a website, which, you put money into an account. You have a bunch of freelancers.
Yeah.
And they'll write articles for you. I also have a management company that actually pretty much runs Money Inc. right now. So yeah, all the writing is outsourced.
And this group that wanted to invest the $5 million, how are they? I assume that they're going to invest $5 million so that they could grow. They would take a big chunk of the company, and then they would grow the business. How are they going to grow it? Just put out a ton more content? They were going to hire more writers, spend more money, all like that?
Yeah, but the main way to grow it from that level is acquisitions. You'd be essentially looking for other sites to acquire. My sort of initial proposal was to acquire 10 sites at around 500,000 each, and then develop and grow those. You can start from scratch. I have plenty of sites that I started from scratch. Money Inc. was started from scratch. I think I've made 3 acquisitions over the course of my career with websites. So I have strong familiarity with acquisitions, as well as selling a couple of properties as well. So yeah, I mean, nowadays, if I were to talk to someone and advise them on getting into that particular business, I would likely tell them to acquire websites as opposed to start them from scratch. It's a lot harder these days to start them from scratch.
Sure. And then how does somebody go from doing that to being a coach?
Good question. So 2020, right? COVID was kind of rampant. Everyone's sitting at home, twiddling their thumbs, locked into their homes, and nobody knows what to do, right? And I'm farting around doing whatever, and I go on LinkedIn. And I've been a member of LinkedIn since, I don't know, 2008, whatever, but I hadn't been on there in forever. I couldn't tell you how I got on there or remember what happened. All I do know is that I went on there and I started seeing these articles in the feed. And I'm looking at them and I see that they all have like likes and comments. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. This is like, Twitter or Instagram or any other social media. But I saw a lot of engagement for a relatively small following, which really piqued my interest. I was like, wow, that people are getting a lot of interest and a lot of views on their articles, but they don't have these massive followings. So I said, all right, I'm going to put something out there. What the hell? And I just started doing videos of myself in my backyard, just talking. And like,
I've seen a few of them. Yes.
yeah, at the time, video was favored by the algorithm. So I just went with it. And I posted a ton of stuff, I don't know, a good 500 videos or so over the next, year or two. And I picked up a really good following. Honestly, the reason I started was just to see if I could do it. I had time and I always liked motivating people. I used to do stand-up in New York City for a bit. And so it came reasonably natural, to me. It was a little weird on camera at first. I'll admit it. It was strange. My first videos on LinkedIn definitely looked weird and nervous, but when I got used to it, it just was a lot of fun. And I would love to just spit out stuff for a good minute or two. And, within a year or so, the following picked up quite a bit. And that's when I started getting inquiries. I never even thought of being a coach ever. I mean, oddly enough, both my parents are psychotherapists, which is interesting. And I was very close to going down that path. Not even that long ago, about a decade ago, I was considering completely changing and being a psychotherapist. And I got into the school and everything, and I decided kind of last minute I didn't want to do it. But the idea of working with people from a one-to-one basis had always intrigued me, but I didn't like the therapy part of it. I always liked the motivational part of it and the business side of things. So when people started asking me, like, do you do coaching? In my head, I'm like, I don't really know what for. But then I just started asking questions and I started, sort of gathering, like, why are people reaching out to me? And I would just ask them. And finally, I just decided to do it. And there was no rhyme or reason. I came up with a rate and I said, let's talk. And I just started doing it. And it's funny, the first go around, I liked it, but I didn't love it. And I think it's because I didn't have a real clear picture of who I wanted to work with, oddly enough. And as time went by, I worked with my own coaches and sort of refined my messaging and who I felt I could help the best, which was really people in my own age bracket going through the things that I had gone through that I felt I could help them with. So nowadays I'm very, very locked in on the demographic and the folks that I think could most likely benefit from time spent with me.
And so I'm curious of what you noticed about the videos on LinkedIn, because at least in my opinion, yours stand out as being different. People might swap out that word with obnoxious or direct or something else. So I would imagine you got some hate as well as you got all the appreciation that you have. Can you talk a little bit about how you decided on what your persona was going to be online and what the feedback was like initially and how that caused you to change, if you changed at all?
Sure. There was never a persona. It was just me. So everything you see on those videos is me. And the best compliment I'll always get is when I talk to people one-to-one, they're like, you're exactly how you are in the videos. And that to me is the highest, compliment that there can be. So, direct is one way to put it, harsh truth teller, whatever you want to call it. I just don't believe in wasting any time and blowing smoke up anyone's ass. So
but I also think when you're we'll call it an inflection point. Usually inflection points come with some emotional pain that people are trying to figure out or get through.
Sure.
And I would much rather have somebody club me over the head with the truth as opposed to gradually teasing out the truth from, discovery over a couple of months. Have you found that to be a reaction?
Yeah, I mean that oddly enough, that's, coaching's cousin, therapy, right? So sometimes people, one similarity I will say is very interesting in coaching and therapy is that um I don't believe in telling people what to do. I don't believe in necessarily saying to someone, this is your problem. It's more of it is a discovery, and I would way rather someone be able to help themselves than me come in and sort of rescue them and tell them what to do. But if that requires a club over the head, then I'll be standing there with the club, right? I don't have a problem with that. But there is something to be said about everyone, certainly has their own personality, their own whatever makes them tick. So that's certainly up to me to determine, how I'm going to move forward with the person. But I would say that the majority of people who come to me know that I don't have a problem using the club.
Being direct. Yes.
Yeah.
So let me wrap up with this question. The demographic you talked about that you serve most often, could you describe who that is in terms of kind of age, what the problem in life is, and maybe where they are economically? And then the 2 or 3 most important messages you'd want to share with them as we wrap up?
Sure. I would say I actually have a piece of content coming out about this, and it's a term that I guess I coined. I don't really know. It's very interesting, but I'm calling it, and it's just funny because I want it to sound clinical, even though it's not. I just call it MTS, mountaintop syndrome. And by definition, the way I define mountaintop syndrome is the person who is just continuously climbing this mountain, and they've usually reached a peak, and they realize either A, it's the wrong mountain, or B, they want to go climb another one. And those mountain peaks are usually, it could mean wealth, it could mean status, it could mean position at a particular job. And what inevitably happens is they say to themselves, damn it, this might be the wrong mountain, or what the hell am I even doing on this one? And a lot of the times that they climb those mountains in the first place is because of what they've been told all these years. It's living, someone else's dream as opposed to their own. And what I would tell those people is, A, you're certainly not alone. That is a very, very common issue. And B, do something about it. Instead of just sitting there worrying about it, A, acknowledge that it exists, and B, start at least, looking for other examples of it. At least, get it out there to someone. It doesn't have to be me. Could be a therapist, could be a friend, could be a family member. It's like any other problem that I think really does need to be acknowledged, and it's real. And I'm a firm believer in the fact that life is very, very short, and I do not believe in wasting time. And the worst thing you could do is spend years, if not decades, living a life that all along you kind of didn't feel was your own.
Right.
Yeah.
And you've walked guys and women down that decision trail before. So whether or not you're the most qualified, finger quotes in the air, or not, you at least have a bunch of experience asking the right questions and sharing the experience of others.
Absolutely. And I would never call myself the most qualified. Fact of the matter is, I'll be the first to acknowledge that there are many clients that I work with that are way further along than me in certain respects of their lives, but they're also way behind in a few key ones, right? And that's where someone like me comes in. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't intimidated by some of the people that I work with. But they're also intimidated by me because I'm very comfortable in who I am and sort of what I want. And I think that's a challenge for a lot of people. So as far as my qualifications and abilities, you'd have to ask all of them.
Excellent. Well, and this was really great. I mean, there's a bunch of fascinating stuff in here we could just go on and on and on about. But if somebody wanted to reach out, first of all, as listeners know, all the show notes and the link to you and to your LinkedIn and to your website are all on the show notes at secondbitepodcast.com. But if somebody wanted to reach out and connect with you directly, Nat, that is not online but listening, how would they do that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have a website. It's my name, NatBerman, natberman.com. So that's basically my sort of coaching page. Talks about who I am, what I do. And that's the easiest way to get in touch. Yeah, is by going there.
That's great. I've enjoyed watching your content. It's thoughtful and it's insightful and it's helpful. And I think, we mostly serve entrepreneurs and very successful entrepreneurs. And the content that you put out, I know is appreciated by those that get so much from it. So it was great to be able to meet you in person, or at least screen to screen, and to be able to share a little bit today, Nat. So thank you for being with us.
Sure. Appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to the Second Bite podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.